Alright, g'day IB psychologists. In this video, we're going to review the exam questions you might get if you're studying for paper 2 in IB psychology. We're going to focus on the option of health psychology. So if you're studying health psychology for paper 2, stick around. This is going to be filled with useful information. We're going to start by doing a quick review of what's in paper 2. So then if you know what's in the exam, you'll know what to study. Then I'll look at a few of the exam questions you might get. And then we'll look at how to study. So parts 2 and 4 is really where all the exam tips come in, and hopefully it's going to do a few things. It's going to make it easier for you to study. You're going to know what you need to revise for the exams, and you're going to avoid studying things unnecessarily. Alright, let's have a look. Paper 2, quick review. So remember, Paper 2 is about the options, and there are 4 options in IB psychology: human relationships, abnormal psychology, health psychology, and developmental psychology. By far the most popular are human relationships and abnormal. Health psychology comes in third, but if you've got the right materials, it can be really interesting and useful. Hey, speaking of materials, links in the description for some new stuff about stress for IB health psychology. The options, so for standard level, you study one option, your exam goes for 1 hour, and you write 1 essay. For higher level, you have 2 options, 2 hours, and 2 essays. Now, I would just say though, make sure you clarify and check with your teacher. At the time of writing this, these have changed a little bit because of COVID and cancellations of exams. So my higher level students, for example, they just did 1 option, and standard levels paper 2 was cancelled. So just double check that. But this is how it should work ordinarily. Alright, so let's have a look at the essay questions in paper 2. So there's no short answer questions in paper 2, it's just essays. And in every option, there are 3 topics. So in health psychology, we have these 3 topics. Understanding this becomes really important when you are figuring out what to study for the exams, because every topic has 1 question. Now you're guaranteed 1 question per topic. Now the command terms are discuss, evaluate, contrast, and to what extent. I would say discuss and evaluate mean the same thing, right? Pretty much. Contrast, you know what that means, right? To find the similarities and differences, or the differences between the 2 things. To what extent often is the same as discuss, and right, you're just saying to what extent is really saying yes but. Anyway, they are the 4 command terms. That's how the exam questions will begin. So this is taken from May 2021, and here are the 3 questions. And we can see when we align this with the overview of the health psychology option, 1 question comes from Determinants of Health, and this is a content point on the biopsychosocial model. Another question comes from the health problems topics, and another question comes from the promoting health topics. So it's never going to be the fact you'll get 2 health problems questions, 1 determinants, and they won't ask you about promoting health. You're guaranteed 1 from each topic. I can't stress that enough because it becomes really important for a reason I'm going to explain shortly. Just remember, you might also be asked about research methods and ethics and the 3 approaches: biological, cognitive, social, cultural. And they could be asked in relation to each topic, right? And that's where you have to know the differences between topics and content. All right, if this is confusing, I apologize. I wish it was made simpler, but the harder you work on this, the easier it will become. By the way, revision guide, download the preview, link in the description. You can get the PDF preview to have a look what it's about. This hopefully makes things much easier. All right, so now we know what's going to be in the exam. Let's have a look at some exam tips. So because you are guaranteed 1 question per topic, pick 1 topic. So as a teacher, I teach all 3, but I choose 1 to go really in depth with. And I'm going to explain what one I teach in depth in a moment. And then make sure for that 1 topic, you are ready for any possible exam question. Now, the reason I don't feel bad saying choose 1 topic, it sounds like I'm recommending taking shortcuts. It sounds like I'm recommending finding holes in the course. It's because when you couple the fact you've got to study all that content, plus research methods, plus the 3 approaches, plus ethical considerations, to revise more than 1 topic for any of those questions would be unnecessary, and it would be crazy. It would just be too much content to try to review in the 20 hours that they allocate us. So you need to make sure that you've got all the content points, the 3 approaches, the research methods, and the ethics for that 1 topic. You can see trying to do that for 3 topics, it's crazy. Now, later I'll explain how you can do all that with the health problems topic, and you can find some overlaps as well. Overlaps between the topics and overlaps with paper 1. Alright, so the health psychology topics, there are 3. Determinants, health problems, and promoting health. Alright, now first, and I recommend, we're going to focus on health problems. This is the best one to study for the exams. Quite very simply, have a look first. There's 2 bullet points. There's 2 content points to this. Straight away, it looks like there's less content than the determinants, and the same as promoting. So it's at an advantage already. And we'll look at other reasons why it's the best one to study in a moment. Okay, so this is what we're looking at. These are the 3 topics and the 3 content points. So one reason why the health problems is the best compared to the promoting health is when you might have to be asked about the biocognitive social cultural approaches in relation to this. Now, when you see those in relation to promoting health, that becomes really tricky. Like, how would you ask the question, the biological approach to promoting health? Medication, I guess, but here we have effectiveness of health promotion programs. So depending on your health problem that you're looking at, that can be pretty tricky. So you could look at diet medication if you're doing obesity, but let's say we're doing stress, and stresses are the examples that I'm going to explain in this because it's the most common problem studied, and also it's the one that I've just written a whole bunch of materials on. There's not a lot of biological approach to the study of stress, really, or the cognitive approach, and this latest exam asked about one or more socio-cultural factors in promoting health. That question, it's possible to answer it, but it's very, very difficult. So I wouldn't recommend doing promoting health. I do recommend, if you're a teacher watching this, the promoting health is great in the stress option about how to cope with stress and the coping with stress. But so when I'm going to teach the stress stuff, I'm not going to teach it for the exams, the health promotion. I'm going to teach the coping with stress, mindfulness, sleep, diet, exercise, all that stuff, preparing students for life, not just for the exams. For the exams, we're doing the health problems, and that's where this is the exam preparation stuff. Okay, I think I've made my point there. So I would recommend choosing health problems as your number 1 topic. Maybe have determinants as a backup because there's a lot of overlap here, and I'll explain that more later. And then promoting health, disregard. By the way, there's a link in the description to a blog post where I've got other exam questions as well, so you can check that out. Alright, so let's have a look at the exam questions for the health problems topic. Alright, so health problems has 2 content points, explanations and prevalence rates. So if we look at this first one, explanations, the types of exam questions you might get could be the approaches. And this is why I like this topic for the exams. It makes perfect sense to link the 3 approaches to this topic in this particular content point. You got biological explanations of, say, stress or obesity, cognitive explanations, and socio-cultural explanations. Be prepared for this as well. You might be asked to contrast 2 explanations, or to discuss or evaluate 2 explanations, or it might not say biological, cognitive, socio-cultural. It might just be generic, like evaluate 1 or more explanations. And remember the 4 command terms down here as well. So the health problems, if you're studying this, also be prepared about research methods and ethical considerations. So it would say something like, let's have a look at the questions. I'll show you the examples in a second. Here are some sample questions. I've written these out. The screenshot is taken straight from the blog post. You can read this down below. There's a link in the description. So it could be something general, like evaluate 1 or more studies, investigating 1 health problem, discuss 1 or more explanations. So these hashtags, these have actually been asked in the exams already. Okay, evaluate 1 or more studies. All right, contrast 2. So this is just the generic explanation. And then if we look at here, what it might look like if the approaches are linked to the health problems topic, discuss the biological approach to understanding 1 or more health problems. Now it should always say 1 or more. However, I recommend studying 1 in detail in case they say understanding 1 health problem. They really, really should not ask about 2 health problems that says it in the guide, 1 or more of the following: stress, obesity, addiction, sexual health, and there's one other that's escaping me. But be prepared about research methods. In the most recent exams, they asked a question in Abnormal Psychology, paper 2, about the etiologies about 2 research methods. Now that sets a very important precedent that you might be asked about 2 research methods to use to study health problems. Another exam tip: different types of experiments are not different types of research methods according to the IB. So a true experiment and a true experiment and a failed experiment, that's one method experiments. Okay. Apparently not until when you get to paper 3, and then paper 3, they're all different methods, but don't let me rant about the inconsistencies here. So it is possible to ask about 2 research methods and also asked about 2 ethical considerations. Okay, so just be wary of that. So here are some possible questions you might be asked. Now, at the end of the video, I'm going to just give you a review to show you how you study for this, right, and what you need to know in a more concise manner. So stick around, we'll get to that. But let's have a look now at the prevalence rates of health problems. So the prevalence rate, this is pretty easy to predict what the questions might be. Discuss prevalence rates, or they might say evaluate research related to prevalence rates, but it would probably be discuss. And we can see here, this is a previous exam question on this. Using 1 or more health problems as examples, discuss prevalence rates. And yes, I spelt discuss wrong, so I fixed it on the blog. Now, if we look at the second topic, determinants of health. So, all right, so this has 3 content points, but actually, they kind of mean the same thing. We're going to look at what I mean by that. So these are the questions you might be asked. Evaluate or discuss the biopsychosocial model. So if you like this topic for the exams, that's a really good one to become an expert in doing. Evaluate, discuss means the same thing. Strengths and limitations, balance, review. It's great, but it's not. It's great, but it's not. Balance, discuss, evaluate means the same thing. Other people can argue that all they like. I don't worry about it. Determinants of health. So we've got dispositional factors and or health beliefs. So if we just come back, it's important to note with this and this little star here, and this is explained elsewhere, this is one of the 3 topics in the guide where these 2 might be separated. So risk and protective factors should always be asked risk and or protective factors. But this one has been highlighted in the IB Psychology Guide as one of the few that you could be asked dispositional factors only or health beliefs only or both. That's important to know. Again, this is why I put this as the second choice, because already this is feeling like it's more confusing, right, than the health problems option. Then we have risk and or protective factors. And again, determinants of health, you've got evaluate or discuss the research methods in understanding determinants of health and the ethical considerations. All right. So here are some possible example questions. The hashtags here are those that have already been asked. All right. And so here's a good example here of a to what extent. To what extent is 1 or more dispositional factors a determinant of health? I've asked that already. Now there aren't a lot of past exam questions here because this is 2021 as I'm recording this, and we've only had 2 exam sessions. We had one of them was cancelled. So we've had the November, so we haven't had that many years of the exams. Okay, risk and protective factors, discuss how 1 or more risk and or protective factors affect health. Okay, and here is the explanation about the separating of the pairing. Again, blog post explains all of this. So top tips: if you revise the health problems and you have the health problems as your number 1 topic to revise, right, then those explanations of the health problem, let's say stress, that's the same as a risk factor, right? You identify a factor and say, well, this factor can explain why some people get more stressed. That's a risk factor. These also can be dispositional factors, and a lot of times, I'll give you some examples in a little moment. There are also protective factors, health beliefs, and you can't understand why people get stressed by just looking at one specific approach. You actually have to look at how those factors intertwine and combine, and voila, you have the biopsychosocial model. So when we look at this health problems and determinants of health, really, if you become an expert in the health problems, you're pretty much covered for most of, if not all of, the questions from the determinants of health, right? You just have to change, all you have to do is change the wording, pretty much. Even the research methods and ethical considerations. If you're understanding the research methods to use to understand health problems, you're understanding how the research methods are used to figure out determinants of health. So there's the same content here. Let me give you an example. One cognitive explanation of stress included in the latest stress books and ebooks that I've written. Did I mention those? Links in the description. locus of control is a cognitive explanation. Really quickly, locus of control means, do you think things are within your control or beyond your control? So if you have, this locus of control is a dispositional factor, right? It's your way of thinking. It's within your disposition, your personality. It's an internal factor. An external locus of control, you believe that your stress levels are entirely dictated by the world around you. That's a risk factor. Those people who have that type of thinking, that type of loci of control, are more at risk for experiencing high levels of stress. The protective factor is having an internal locus of control. So focusing on and believing that your levels of stress are within your control and you can govern it and affect it. That's also a belief. Notice I use the word belief. So that locus of control, to what extent do you believe your levels of stress are determined by internal and external factors? Locus of control is a health belief. Now, if you look at locus of control, is also intertwined with socio-cultural factors, right, and other environmental factors and biological factors. For example, girls tend to be more inclined to have an external locus of control. This could be why girls tend to have high levels of perceived stress, right, as recorded by lots of studies. So that's an example of possibly a social-cultural, although gender, is that a good example there? Maybe not. But that's the BPS model. Okay, well, let's have a look at a biological explanation, which will give us a better link with the BPS model. And that probably brings me to my point that the health problems and determinants doesn't perfectly overlap because of the BPS model. There's a bit more content there that you'll want to revise. Again, and that's all covered in the revision guide you can read about. And I'll be making videos on all of this content as well. So if we look at the genetics, a biological explanation, again, we can see this gives me a biological explanation. It's genetic, so it's a dispositional factor. A risk factor, so the COMT gene, very quickly, is it's also called the warrior gene. You can, depending on your genetic variation, you could be a warrior or a warrior. My accent means it's hard for me to distinguish between those two, right? To worry or to war. Okay, so if you have the warrior gene, that's the MET variant, that's a risk factor. But if you have the VAL variant, and about a quarter of people are VALs, a quarter of people are METs, and half are a bit of both. So you might be thinking, which one are you? If you have the warrior gene, that's a protective factor. This is also looking at the BPS model, right? Because your genetics is linked with the way you think and the way you approach different situations. Okay. Now, the benefit of this as well is this could be used for paper 1 with the genetics topics also. So there we see, by becoming an expert in the health problems, you're also backing up, and you have it as a nice backup for paper, for a second topic as a nice backup. Now, topic 3, promoting health. I put the questions in the blog post. I'm not going to go through them here because I want to spend the time in this video doing other things. I just don't recommend revising promoting health for the IB exam. There are too many curveball questions, and especially if I'm studying about stress, then I really want students to look at the health promotions, the health problems and determinants. Those two are really good for the exams. Okay, so that's what I would recommend doing. All right, let's have a look at how to study. So first of all, to reiterate, I recommend choose this as your go-to expert number 1 topic. Determinants of health as a backup. Promoting health, read it for interest's sake. Teach it because of its relevance for life, not so much the exams. You should know, for health problems, a bio, cognitive, and social cultural explanation. Become an expert in one, right? That's what I recommend. Always go for depth, because the exam should always ask for one or more of these explanations. Okay, so go for depth. Now, you should have 2 supporting studies for each of those explanations. And ideally, if you can, and I've tried to do this as much as I can in this book, find a study and find an explanation that combines 2 of those things. So there's studies that link, and this is included in the works, in the books here. Social status is combined with your appraisals, with your way of thinking, and also with your biological responses. Your locus of control and your appraisals, how you think about stress, that's also linked to your physiological stress response. So try to find those studies that link between the 2. The COMT gene, and actually your brain, the COMT gene affects your brain's activity, but your brain activity and its response to stress is also influenced by adverse childhood experiences, right? Your trauma growing up as a kid. So if you can find a third study, 2 supporting studies and a third one that shows, hey, it's not just this explanation, but this is actually coupled with another one, that gives you a really good base of knowledge of studies to approach and answer any question. Okay. Now, you'd also need one about prevalence. I think I might have forgotten to add prevalence here. Sorry. You should also have be able to discuss prevalence rates. Okay. So looking at prevalence rates of stress. Now I'm going to make a whole other video about that because it's a bit tricky to talk about prevalence rates of stress because it's not a specific diagnosis. But now another tip, just while I think of it, if you look at social status, that couples as your prevalence rate. Because people with low subjective social status and socioeconomic status tend to have high levels of stress. So there you have your sociocultural explanation based on status and also your prevalence rates. Stress, high levels of reported stress are more prevalent in people from lower status. So it covers that topic. Voila. Same thing if you're doing disorders and, for example, PTSD or depression, you can do the same. You can take the same approach. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I doubled up on slides. All right. So here I added the prevalence, a copy paste error. So same thing here, but one explanation of prevalence rate disparity, for example, social status, or you might look at gender. So just quickly with stress, men typically have a higher level of acute response to stress. So we react more. Our stress responses is higher in short term, but reported stress levels are higher in females. And so we can look at why that is. Again, all covered in this stress unit. So if you've done that, that means you have covered the biological approach with health problems, cognitive, social, cultural, prevalence rates, research methods, and ethical considerations. That topic is done, right? You're a master at that. Plus, you now have the risk and protective factors, the comp gene, locus of control, appraisal, social status. Right? Think about socioeconomic status as a risk and protective factor. I'm protected if you have high status, you're at risk if you have low status. Right? Any risk factor is easily explained as a protective and vice versa. You just look at the opposite. Dispositional factors and health beliefs, we have those covered already, and determinants of health. So let's say you're in the exam like November 2019 and you get used one or more, and you're thinking about, okay, health problems, that's my go-to question, and you get this one. Using one or more health problems as examples, discuss prevalence rates. And you're like, man, I didn't like prevalence rates because rates and stress, there's not really prevalence rate. It's not like a disorder. Okay, what do we got here? Discuss one or more risk and or protective factors influencing one or more health issues. All right, brilliant. My health issue is stress. My risk, one or more. Cool. I studied all those biological, cognitive, social, cultural explanations of stress. Now I just find out, okay, what are my risk factors? What are my protective factors? And now you've got complete range. So you've gone from having, oh, this isn't my best topic to, oh, I can completely choose whichever one I want because you had that as a backup. Does that make sense? Right? Whichever explanation of stress that you liked. So that's my advice there. I hope that was helpful. I didn't want to go through, there's so many different slight variations of these exam questions that I just wanted to give you the idea of what the general questions will look like and how to approach them. Again, if you are a student, then these materials really are designed to be purchased by your teacher in the school. So if you think that this might be interesting or if you'd like to learn about stress, then you can send this to your teachers. If you're a teacher watching this, this is my first bundled unit where I'm trying to do a few different digital resources combined into one. So I haven't got the revision guide and the ebook are available right now. You can, as I'm recording this, and then coming shortly, and hopefully by the time you're watching this, they'll be ready. The student's guide is going to have a full audiobook. I'm going to experiment with this and see how popular it is. Hopefully this will help students. There'll be example essays based on the health psychology option. So using the explanations I've covered in this topic. Also, there'll be digital printable flashcards that will be available to cover that go with the revision guide, and a teacher support pack. If you've seen these before, they have all the PowerPoint slides and workbooks. So and then these will all be sold together in a bundle. I'm not going to lie. These take a massive amount of time to create, so I hope they're helpful. And anyway, if you are a student, you can flick this to your teacher. Thank you for letting me talk about that stuff. The stress unit is really fascinating and I think really useful for students to learn about. It's something that it's not just for exams, it's about how we cope with stress for life. Okay, lots of links. We've got a Facebook group, blog. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment if this was helpful. That would be really great. If this was helpful, please let me know because I will take the time to make it for the other approaches and the other options as well. All right, thank you and good luck with your exams.